let's get started sort of like we did last week and take just a minute to sort of be quiet and kind of come to this space and contemplate your motivation for this time. Like, why are you taking this class? Why are you practicing? And if you can get in touch with your highest motivation, maybe you want to help all living beings. That would be lovely. And then when you are feeling ready, you can kind of open your eyes and join us here in this virtual space. So I was thinking, and a couple of you weren't in the class last week, but I did want to just pause before launching in and just to see if anyone had any questions or comments or anything that they wanted to kind of say about last week, or maybe something that's coming up for you heavily that you'd like to talk about tonight. And I'm going to do what I'm going to do is I'm going to open for participation, and then I'll be quiet for a minute. And if you want to, please say something. And if you don't, that's totally fine. Yes. Hi. Nice to virtually meet you.
I'm part of the Santa Fe group. Had one death this week, and 3 or 4 friends including myself. I've had some dermatological stuff with some health challenges, and it's just been a lot.
Oh, that is a lot.
Yeah.
And death is one of the most challenging things that we face, and also one of those opportunities to wake us up to just the impermanence of things. And sometimes it can be, like so often, one of those things that is painful, but can also help kind of fuel our practice.
Right.
But then, last week I spent a lot of time talking about being gentle with yourself also when you're going through, personal things and experiencing loss. I think it's as people who are trying to practice in the path, sometimes we can get a little bit rigid with ourselves. And, just having the wisdom to be gentle and not push yourself, and, do the things that feel nurturing and enriching to you. But I think, setting the motivation is also a great time to think about, that person in your life, and then the things that your friends and you are going through, health challenges. And we can dedicate at the end, as part of our dedication, like, for healing, and healing in a short-term sort of conventional sense. But most importantly, I think, healing long term, right? Like last week, I talked a lot about sometimes our wishes and motivations. They're so incredibly lofty, can be, that we almost don't want to acknowledge them or say them, want to help all beings. Like how wonderful it would be if no one suffered, right? Like what I love about Dharma class and being with Buddhist friends, this is the place that we can give those things a voice. Because Lord Buddha says they're possible, right? And what we're doing here, if all of this is true, and we can, have some part of our mind sort of sitting back as the observer, let me experiment and find out. But if all of this is true, it's possible. And the time that we're spending today can become a direct cause for that. So I think, healing, short-term healing, but ultimately, how wonderful it would be never to experience that kind of suffering for anyone. So at the end, when we're dedicating, think about that. Think about taking the virtue of tonight and the virtue of the totality of your life and dedicating to that. It's really powerful. So when I was thinking how to sort of format this, I thought, there's so many different ways, because when you say, being your own therapist, that's all of Buddhism. So like, okay, what's the framework for this? And people have done different things. And I thought, being sort of a traditionalist, let's take a Lamrim approach. So last week, I talked a lot about renunciation. And I think I talked too much and there wasn't enough, but again, what's enough? I so long as you feel okay, I'm okay. But there were a couple of things I wanted to sort of close out on that I think I left out that were important. So what are the methods for developing renunciation? And I talked a lot about what it is, but I didn't talk about like, how do you develop that in yourself? So I thought just to spend a real little bit of time with some great Galupa lists, because this is a tradition that likes to list things. And I don't know, that approach appeals to me. If you're here, probably appeals to you, or you're sampling and you'll find the thing that really floats your boat. But just a couple of lists. So there's two methods to develop renunciation. One is to meditate on death and impermanence. So just as you were saying, and for you, Linda, that'll be really fresh, right? Again, though, if it starts to weigh you down, then maybe you got to go for something uplifting, right? But meditating on death and impermanence, and that's the more kind of sobering method. And we need to do both of these things, I think, to be effective. And the other is to meditate on what they call the leisures and fortunes of having a precious human rebirth. So you've probably heard that expression, precious human rebirth. My Dharma friends and I, that's what we say to, congratulations on your precious human rebirth. I'm rejoicing in it on your birthday, So what are these like leisures and fortunes of being human? And so here's another list. And I'm going to tell you that I'm having to look at my notes, just so you know. There's stuff I know off the top of my head, and there's stuff that I need to revisit, which is a little bit shameful because it is Lamrim. It is, it's stages of the path, things that I've meditated on and read over and over and over again, but still have to kind of go back. So the 8 leisures are, the first 4 are really easy. It's basically not being born in another realm. So not being born in a God realm, not being born in an animal realm, not being born in hell, not being born as a craving spirit or hungry ghost. You've probably heard that term. And each of those are sort of characterized, like in the God realm, things are, and there's gods and demigods, but it's all considered the God realm. Things are so good that there's no motivation to evolve. There's no motivation for practice. That's why they're not fortunate, even though they're, blissed out most of the time. It's not an ideal situation. Animal realm, the things with animals is they're very instinct driven. So the intellect to, be able to You know, just intellectually, they're not as bright as we are. They're really very, very focused on just immediate kind of survival. And then hell, it's overwhelmed by suffering and pain, so that there's no opportunity, there's no space to practice. And then hungry ghosts are overwhelmed with craving. So we don't have any of those situations. So those are the first four leisures. Like we have the leisure of not being born in those realms. We're not born in a barbaric land, and we could debate that, but you know, in the grand scheme, it could be much worse. So be happy, rejoice that we're not born in a barbaric land. We're not holding wrong views about things like karma. I see that laughter, karma and morality, right? So we have a sense of things that are virtuous and non-virtuous. It doesn't mean that we're always doing them, but we have that sense. And in the world, there is also a sense of kind of justice, even if they're not using the words like karma. There's those sorts of ideas are existing in the world. We are born in a time and place where there is dharma. So there's dharma in the nominal sense and in the ultimate sense. So the nominal sense is, you know, there's the words and the books, but the ultimate sense is there is dharma existing in the minds of human beings. There are people who have realization in this world. And then the last one is that we have healthy minds. So we're not crazy or, you know, mentally impaired to the point that we can't practice. So, you know, those are things that we don't always reflect on and can take for granted. But just thinking about, if you think of beginningless lives and, countless planets and realms and all these different realms and places where beings could be born, then to have those conditions is pretty unique and special. So something to rejoice about. And then the 10 fortunes and endowments, some are slightly repetitive, but the first is to be human. The next is to have access to the Dharma. So everybody doesn't have that. We have all of our senses are intact. We have some kind of morality. And again, to greater or lesser degrees, we can, argue that, but we do have that. And we're able to cultivate some amount of faith. And, I mentioned last week, intelligent faith, right? So things that we're checking out, it's not blind faith. Actually, blind faith isn't going to work for us for very long. It isn't really going to progress us on the path, right? You might accidentally accumulate some merit or good karma that later facilitate you to go kind of deeper, but it's blind faith really isn't going to get us anywhere. We're on a planet where the Buddha came. We're on a planet where the Buddha taught. The teachings still exist. There's a Sangha, people are practicing. And I love this. There is compassion in the world still. And it's so funny, sometimes you see people almost not, it's very easy, I think, especially with social media, to depersonalize people or to become like one-dimensional. But I always feel so good when I go out into the world. We were isolated so much during COVID. But for me, going into the world, back into the world, I was worried, like we see, it felt like the zombie apocalypse, right? For many of us, certainly if we turn on the news, which felt important. And I'm not a news consumer really, but it felt very important, especially, the last few years. But as soon as, getting out in the world and seeing that people are kind, that people, most people do want to help other people, right? And if we really look, we can see that the only time that that's not true is usually when there's some kind of, inner pain that they're not able to handle with themselves, right? And so I think that's, again, going back to be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself. If you're not, there's no chance you're going to be able to do that for others. So I wanted to kind of go through those two methods. Again, death and impermanence, think about that, help cultivate that renunciation, and then meditating on just the great good fortune that we have of this human life. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up just briefly, and we'll probably go more into this maybe in the last session, but 4 powers of purification. So, I talked about dedicating and setting your motivation and kind of gave that analogy of a seed. So I wanted to talk about, some of us have done heavy karmic things over the course of our lives, or things that just kind of like eat away at us, right? Like, oh, I regret doing this thing. In that sense, regret from a Buddhist perspective is a very helpful tool, because it's one of those things you can, well, there's 4 ways that we can go about purifying something, and 4 steps to take. And the first is to have regret. So understanding that, and regret is not like a shame, it's not like a self-flagellation. Regret here is just an intelligent understanding, like, I've done something that's actually going to come back and hurt me, right? It's sort of like if you drank some poison, the feeling that you would have after that would be, I regret that. That was a mistake. I wish I hadn't done that. That kind of regret, not self-hatred. And then the next step, so I always use R's. These are presented in different ways, but ultimately I like to use 4 R words because it was easy for me to remember. So the first is regret. The second is refuge. So, and again, it's like I drank poison, but there's something that can help. There is like an antidote. There's something that can actually help. And that feeling that this is something that can help is refuge. That's exactly what refuge is. Having some hopefully intelligent faith that the Buddha's teachings can help me, that Dharma can help. So that's the second one. The third R is a remedy. So this is like doing some kind of remediation. So, okay, I was selfish, so I'm going to do, I don't know, some act of generosity. It's nice if there's a little bit of a relationship to the makeup action, but it can also be, I'm going to do, these mantras. I mean, that's sort of like my old Catholic background, like do 10 Hail Marys and Our Father and whatever. But it's a similar kind of idea, that you do a remedy to kind of correct. And it doesn't have to be really correcting one-on-one. It doesn't have to be, because sometimes say you did something that you feel was unkind to another person. Sometimes things are so emotionally charged that it actually wouldn't even be helpful to try to make it up with that person, right? So you find another thing that seems related. But really, ultimately, your personal practice is the best remedy, right? Your understanding of emptiness, bodhicitta, trying to cultivate these things in yourself, that's the ultimate remedy. And then the last thing is kind of sealing it with resolve. So the resolution, the commitment to try to do better in the future. And you notice I said try to do better in the future and not promise never to do it again. Because, because then you do it again. And now you've done 2 things. You've broken your resolve for something that you were trying to purify, and you've done whatever the thing is. So they say, if you're prone to something, if you're prone to anger, if something is really habitual, for example, then just resolve that I'm going to, for some period of time, if you've got some habitual action that you do, for some period of time, I'm going to try to abstain. I'm going to abstain from that. Something you can actually accomplish. If it's like getting angry, then I'm going to count to 3, before I say something. I'm going to take 3 breaths or whatever that looks like, but some kind of commitment to basically change your behavior and thoughts. And I'm saying thoughts because how we're accumulating negative karma or doing negative karma can come from, any of those 3 doors, our body, speech, or mind, right? So it's not always things that we're doing. It's sometimes what we're saying and sometimes what we're thinking, right? And we talked about 10 known virtues last week, so you know that. So I just wanted to kind of close that out on the renunciation part. And it's not really closed out, but I thank you. But I think it's a good introduction. It's a good starting point. So now kind of talking about bodhicitta. So bodhicitta is, I think, I had it explained to me once as renunciation aimed towards others. So if we think of renunciation as like the fire under our butts that wants to get out of suffering, recognizes that this place is problematic, samsara is not a good place to be, and we want to get out. And the constant ever-present wish, like as a realization, like, because we forget, and I forget, when things are going good, I forget how horrible this place is. Having just lost a friend, it's a reminder, right? It cuts to the quick, right? But there are times when we're not so in touch with the fact that this isn't a great place. So that's renunciation, is that ever-present realization, right? We want to get tastes of it, and we do get tastes of it, and we want to practice these methods to develop that realization. Bodhicitta, you can think of it as, so I am clued in that this is not a good situation for me. This is not good. I want to get out. You can think of bodhicitta as having that renunciation, but focused on other living beings. This is not an okay situation for me, and it is not an okay situation for other people. And I am committed to getting myself out of here, and I'm committed to getting everyone else out as well, doing everything I can for that. So, I mean, that's what real bodhicitta is. And it's a mind. Actually, it's interesting. There is some debate, and I want to say, like Lama Zopa, and I can't remember who else, a little bit of a debate. Is it the thoughts or is it mind? And like main mind, but they say it's something that is a main mind. When you have that realization, then everything you do is coming from that realization. Everything you do is with that motivation. So it's something that we want to develop, and it's thoughts and it's our actions. I think always our thoughts and our actions are very closely, they're closely connected. I will confess, because if you haven't noticed, that's sort of my style, because I think it's just relatable, like sharing. I will say sometimes, oh, I want to do that, or I wish I could do that. How what you really wish for is, do you put your money where your mouth is? Like, where do you spend your time and your energy? What are you really doing with this human life, right? And again, not to be hard on ourselves, but if we have that wish, then it's like people who are in prison. So Venerable Rabina, for many years, she started and ran, and I'm sure is still involved in prison outreach. But these are people who understand their situation. Lama Zopa Rinpoche said, it's really good to be in prison because you know where you are. We're all in prison. We don't know that's where we are. And they are obsessed with getting out. So strangely enough, I studied criminal justice at one point in my life. And I remember going on a tour of a jail, and like the crafty, like weapons and tools to escape, like that they were confiscating. It was just crazy how clever you can be, how much energy, mental energy, physical energy we can have when we understand what our situation is. So bodhicitta is having that same, I would say, zero tolerance for suffering, for not just myself, but for all beings. And so there's two primary methods that we use to cultivate bodhicitta. So the first one is 7-step cause and effect. And so this came down from Lama Atisha. So if you look at Tibetan Buddhism, kind of how it has evolved, so Atisha really helped to propagate. He was basically reviving Buddhism in Tibet. And then Lama Tsongkhapa kind of did the same thing. So in a way, they were like reformists. Buddhism was, I wouldn't say dying out, but, there was some things were changing, and they were great reformists who came in. And, Lama Atisha composed Lamp on the Path to Enlightenment, which is, Lam Rim. So Je Tsongkhapa in the same way, Lam Rim Chenmo. So he came up with this 7 cause and effect points to develop bodhicitta. So the first one is recognizing that all living beings have been our mother. And this is really about developing equanimity. So, everyone doesn't have a great relationship with their mother. But, what you can say if you're on this earth, like somebody gave you like housing in their body for, roughly 9 months, that's kind of a big deal. And then they gave birth to you. And, every fetus doesn't come full term. Everybody isn't born. So there's some kindness there. And then if you think back to, when we talk about, leisure and fortune of a precious human rebirth, that's an amazing thing that your mother has done for you. And in Buddhism, there's some very heavy karmic objects. So, a Buddha, obviously, realized beings, but your parents are also kind of heavy karmic objects because they did give us this opportunity. So thinking, and again, this is a stretch, right? Because we can't see it directly. So being honest, but does it make sense? If our mental continuum has been around for beginningless, countless eons, haven't we probably been everything to each other? And so from that perspective, just imagining, and if it's an imaginary exercise with some kind of logic, or like, okay, does it make sense to me? But just starting out, like, every being has given me this kindness. And then thinking about that kindness. So that's a second step, but it's a separate step. So one is, they've all been my mothers. And what does that mean? It means they've all been kind to me. My existence has depended upon them in some way. And I think there's a lot of different levels, ways that we can kind of touch on these things, but this is the straight up, this is the party line. But I think we can look, I guess I would say, like concentric kind of circles. If imagining every being as your mother is challenging, then you can think in some way, it's a watered down version, but thinking about all of the kindness for everything, we're all sitting in buildings. I don't know. I didn't build this, I didn't put this together. I'm wearing clothes. I didn't harvest any plants for this. I didn't do, I ate food that I didn't grow. I mean, there's so many ways that we've been nurtured and mothered by countless beings. So, I mean, it's a miracle. If you look at it, any individual object that you have, like think about the most, I don't know, a safety pin or a pencil, some tiny little object. If you stop and think about all of the effort and energy and to like create the object, and then to, all of the components of the object to get those and create it, and then to like build a building so that someone else could take those objects and put it in the building for you to be able to go and buy it. I mean, it's kind of mind-blowing. Like everything should be like millions of dollars, because there is nothing that didn't come from the kindness of other living beings. So, it's nice if you can, really try to get your head around, they've all been my mother. But if not, I think there's other things that we can think to kind of set the same tone and then work on it. The third thing is deciding to repay their kindness. And what I love, it's the 7-point cause and effect. It's like, if you really can get your head around one, it follows to think like, wow, what have they done for me? And then it naturally, I think comes up this idea like, I want to do something for them. And then,
I have a question.
oh, please.
The first one is recognizing all living beings have been our mother. And the
Yes.
second one was what?
Remembering their kindness.
Thank you.
Yeah, just remembering their kindness. And then the third is deciding to repay the kindness. The fourth is to develop love for them. And love and compassion are two different things. So the fourth is develop love. The fifth is develop compassion. So developing love is, I want you to have good things. That's love. I want you to have happiness. I want you to have good things. The second, developing compassion, it's like, okay, if I'm like a mother for their only child, that's always the Buddhist analogy. And being that I have a single child, there have been times when I can feel that. And I'm like, wow, I would love to have that feeling for every living being. Because it's an amazing feeling. And I think I mentioned before, maybe I didn't, but the idea of equanimity didn't really appeal to me so much in my very, very first introduction to Buddhism. And I think I was thinking, we're bringing this neutral feeling. And it's not that. Like, bodhicitta isn't a neutral feeling. It is love. It's not bringing anyone down. It's not like I'm not going to love my only child as much as I love my only child. No, it's that I'm actually going to elevate everybody to that level. Like that's what we're doing. We're not tamping down the love. We're not, we are trying to decouple in Buddhist practice, and this is a little bit off, but I'll just say, we are trying to decouple the attachment from the love. But the love is, we want to cultivate that. So developing that wish for them to have all good things and to be happy. And then compassion is wanting to eliminate the suffering. So, I'm saying again, it's a cause and effect thing. So once you love someone and you want them to be happy, then you're going to realize all of the things that are obstacles to that happiness, right? So you want to take the pain away. Then you can give someone the good things, right? But like if a child is falling and hurt themselves, then the first thing you're going to do is tend to that injury before you give them ice cream, right? It's the priority. So when you love someone, naturally from that follows this thought to want to take away and alleviate their suffering. And then the sixth one is to take responsibility to do it yourself. And one of the most effective things for me personally has been when I think about the good fortune that I have of this human life and the preciousness of the Dharma that I've been exposed to, the teachings that I've had. We can be very hard on ourselves. And I certainly know my limitations. We all know our own limitations very intimately. But I love to vacillate between the two positions of, I've got all of these holy lamas and these great Dharma friends, and they're going to help me. They're going to take me along. But then sometimes to say, I don't know what's going on in anyone else's minds. Like, what if I'm it? Like, what if they're counting on me? I have to take that responsibility and not just leave it up to someone else to do, because we don't know what anyone else is going to do. So making a decision that I'm going to take it on, I'm going to own it. And it's one thing to admire a Mother Teresa, and it's another thing to decide to become that. And this path challenges us to become that, to want to become that, to have the audacity, the beautiful, wonderful audacity to aspire to that. And then slowly, right, in a way that doesn't hurt us, in a way that doesn't stretch us beyond our capacity, but just incrementally continuing to stretch. So then the seventh point is, and this works for us as well as for all living beings, decide that I must become enlightened in order to help them. That is the only way. That is the only thing that's ultimately going to help them. And this is nice too, because I think a lot of us, we get, we're confronted all the time with our own limitations, right? We don't have limitless time, limitless resources. We don't have, countless emanation bodies here. So we're always going to feel like we're coming up short. And that's why, this develops this idea that we must become enlightened. That's the only way that we're going to be able to help all living beings. The ordinary methods aren't that effective, and we could just spin cycles upon, and we have cycles upon cycles, right? Trying to do, good things, nice things, be kind, right? But the kindest thing we can do, the best thing we can do for all living beings is to practice these things, to develop the renunciation ourselves, the ability to get out of samsara for ourselves, and then to share that, to become a being who can truly help. So that's the 7-point cause and effect. And then that's one method. And then the other method that is used is something called equalizing and exchanging self for others. So, really simply put, this is a practice of imagining, like I'm looking at you and I'm wondering what you would want from me, and then developing the wish to be able to do that. So it's equalizing me and you. So right, for the most part, we're looking out for this one. This one is most important. So looking out and saying, I'm one being. You are countless beings. There's only one of me. There are countless of you. So just by that virtue of numbers, you're more important than me, right? So shifting some of that focus on just me and trying to look at from the perspective of other people. So and I say people a lot, and Lama Zopa one time corrected me. And I need the correction. All living beings, not just people. But, all living beings are people too. That's sort of what I mean. So those are the primary methods to cultivate bodhicitta. So I'm going to stop again because I've been talking for a really long time, and see if anyone has any thoughts or questions or comments. Please.
I'm very new to Tibetan Buddhism, like in the last 6 weeks or something. But I'm a very practical person, so this whole like step-by-step thing is great for me. Just great.
Oh, well, I'm glad. I think the step-by-step is good for everyone. This is why, Lama Tsongkhapa has like short verses and longer, Lamrim Chenmo, longer verses where you break it down in more subtle ways, but it's the path. It's, give me an instruction book that I can follow, right? And you hear things like, renunciation, like, well, how do I cultivate that, right? How do I cultivate it when the going gets good, right? And then how do I, continue to hold bodhicitta when sometimes we're encountering challenging situations.
So this morning, before I get crabby when I drive. That's really like in my face, like, oh my God, I'm still doing this. So this morning I set a dedication. I'm going to see all drivers as my friends. I'm going to be calm. I'm not going to think anything negative or say anything out loud in the car by myself negative. and I drove to work and it was great. It
Oh, well,
felt
not,
so good. And I was slow and I let the fast, crabby people pass me and vroom by. And I was just like, have a nice day. And I really, I mean, my drive is like 10 minutes only. So I could hold it for 10 minutes, but I did it.
I mean, but this is when I say be an experimentalist, this is exactly what we're talking about though, right? It's like, that's a meditation. That's a meditation and a motivation, and you did it. And I hope that when you go to bed tonight, you dedicate that, remember that you did it, be happy that you did it, and dedicate that. Like those incremental steps are what changes everything. I think, and in that case, I think also, and it doesn't happen all the time, and driving isn't my thing. I mean, that we all have our things, right? The things that push our buttons. But I remember, and of course it was good because I had just come out of a Buddhist teaching. So I'm filled with, there's times when we're more inspired, right? A little bit, we go to a good Dharma class, or you're reading, a great Dharma text or whatever. It inspires us. And so sometimes we're our higher, better selves after those things. So I was just coming from a Buddhist class, and nothing happened on the road, but the guy behind me was like, started pounding on his horn. Like, I guess I wasn't going fast enough, or pounding on his horn and like making this red face and hand gestures and everything. And, the first thought was, well, I'm happy that I don't feel that way. And like, sorry, guy. But if I'm honest, I also had a little bit of a feeling of superiority, because I wasn't that red-faced angry person. These are the things we have to kind of watch, right? So then I thought, what has to be happening in a person for them to get that? Like, there has to be something, whether it's worry about he's going to get where he's going to get, fear for his own life, whatever it is. But like, people aren't like that for no reason. And then when I could actually see that, when intellectually I could see, I don't know that person, but that's not happy, right? So what I can know, I can definitively say that person is suffering. Happy people aren't red-faced giving you the finger and, laying on the horn. So I could easily see this is a suffering being, and have compassion where compassion replaced, the initial arrogance of like, wow, I'm better than you are. I'm a Buddhist. I don't have that thing. Yeah, I didn't have that thing that day, that time, that minute, but I've had that. I've had those things. I've had that frame of mind. So it was very nice to kind of just level it out and recognize like that is a person who's suffering, and we're not our best selves when we're having that kind of suffering, for sure. So I rejoice in your good deed and your commitment. And if you haven't already heard this in the Buddhist circles you travel in, just know, when you rejoice in someone else's goodness, you get 10% of their merit. You don't take it from them, you just get like a portion of it. So literally just being happy. And I'm saying it like happily and joking, and I don't know if it's exactly 10%, but being happy about the good things that other beings are doing or have done, it's like you're investing in it, and you're investing your mental energy into it, and you're kind of like glomming onto that, to that good deed that they've done, if that makes sense. So I want to pause again. If anybody else, I don't know, wants to add something or challenge something.
I was just wondering, do you have to join every Wednesday?
Nope.
Wait, what's today? Tuesday. Yeah, every Tuesday.
Nope, you could totally drop in anytime. Totally welcome.
Oh, okay.
It might
Thank
make
you.
more sense if you can, doing something
Yeah.
regularly might make more sense, but no, it's great
Yeah.
that you're here.
Yeah, I tried to join last week, but I mixed up the days. I thought it was Wednesday. But yeah, thank you for holding this. I've read this book, Becoming Your Own Therapist by Lama.
Wonderful.
I don't
Lama
know.
Yeshe.
Oh, it's Lama Yeshe. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I read
yeah.
it a long time ago, but I always have it in my room with like it's on like my top shelf with my other favorite books because it's always like something I like to go back to.
It's so brilliant. You know, so many of those wisdom archive, just the little books that, and thank you, Nick Rebush, that, you know, Wisdom Archive just gives these books out. And they're just so amazing. Like it is like, you know, you could sit down with a cup of tea or whatever, and it's like Lama Yeshe is talking to you, you know. It's just, yeah, amazing. Amazing. So I'm
Yeah,
glad you
no.
joined, and join anytime. And for anything you missed, like, because I just tried to have like a sequence that makes sense. Much to my horror, last week is on YouTube. But, so if you wanted to look at it, you could, if you have any questions. But also, I'm happy to answer. You know, I said it the first time. I don't want people to feel put on the spot to participate. And I think, so first of all, there's a lot of Buddhists, and actually, you know, Buddhists are inner looking people. So as a whole, aren't necessarily going to be the most like wanting to participate in a discussion, often more introspective, right? You know, let me think, you know, hear this, think about it, digest it, cook it. But then you add to it this Zoom thing, and it's like, oh, some people are not so comfortable being in person. Maybe they're even happier that it's on Zoom. But I do appreciate any thoughts or anything that you want to even derail, because I would say, well, it was derailed for a reason. If you have a question or something that is kind of like heavy on your mind that you want to talk about. So
Okay, I have another question. Oh, well, yeah, well, a question. So I don't live over in New Mexico. I'm over in New Jersey, but I came across this through an email I received in your newsletter, and just like about road rage and whatnot. That's definitely something I think, like where I live, there's just so many people with road rage. And in New York, it's just like crazy. If you don't go too fast enough, which is like 10 miles over the speed limit, then people are riding your tail. So like I'm trying not to like let it bother me when that happens. Like, but I'm probably not doing the Buddhist thing by like, sometimes I'll, yeah, definitely not. Like sometimes when someone's riding my tail, like I'll go slower just to annoy them.
I have to confess, I've done it too. Sometimes I probably fool myself and say it's not to annoy them, it's just to slow them down and show them what they're doing. But you know, it's wrapped up with some of the, just to, you know,
to try to like teach them a lesson, but it really doesn't do anything. It's just, yeah, not safe also.
Yeah, yeah. Can anger them more even, who knows, you know, then there's more road rage. It's interesting you said not the most Buddhist thing. I've said that so many times, not the most Buddhist thing. You know, one of the things I said last week, and I'll just repeat it. Maybe I'll repeat it every time because it's so true. The Buddhist path is about perfecting ourselves. So we are all going to fall short. And so, you know, it should be that like healthy tension of like trying to stretch yourself a little bit, you know, like not being comfortable and just satisfied with like my own crappy ways in whatever area I'm most challenged, you know, wanting to change that and then making some effort to do that gradually. But if we're looking at perfection, that is a huge lofty goal. It's not something that's going to happen tomorrow. It's not something we can make happen on a dime. It's not something that a grand gesture is going to fix. So just I've even said to personal friends, like, sometimes we have to sit with ourselves as hypocrites. And, that's a very uncomfortable place to be. And that can sometimes be exactly what we need to create a change. Like just being on, I think in the world, it's very easy to, and I can't, it can be very easy to just say something isn't even worth trying. Or to say that doesn't matter. Like, because it's uncomfortable. If I can't, so I'm going to give a really super practical example. I had a friend who, actually, this is when we're living at a Buddhist center, and he got, what is it called? Not is it scabies? I don't know, some kind of body lice. And so it was horrible. And he didn't want to kill. So we're living at a Buddhist center and we're all like very steeped in this and really trying, genuinely, sincerely trying. And he's like, he could not live with the discomfort. And so he went out and he bought the whatever poison and he killed the body lice. I have to tell you, I don't, even now, 25 years later, I don't know what I would do if that happened to me. I know what I'd like to do, but I don't know what I'm capable, if I'm really capable of like living with that. So sometimes we do things that are like, that's not who I want to be. So he did this, and then he washed all of his stuff and it came back. He did it again. And he felt terrible. Like he really did feel. So this is the thing, like sometimes you do something because you are facing a limitation of your own. But if you can stay in that place where you don't lower lower your goals or to match where you are, like, no, we're going to have goals that are better than where we are. And that's going to feel uncomfortable. And that's going to help us gradually grow like that. So anyway, the story, it happened a couple times to him and he did it. And then finally he's like, he was just so distraught that it wasn't who he wanted to be. It wasn't what he wanted to do. And he's like, okay, if they come back, I can't do this again. And they didn't come back, so that was good. He didn't get tested. But I think, if we're really looking at ourselves and learning who we are, sometimes new Buddhists will feel worse about themselves initially but it's not that we're getting worse. It's that we're being more mindful and we're more aware of things. So you may notice as you start to practice or meditate or go to classes, you might feel like you're worse. But really what it is that you're noticing things, you're paying attention, and hopefully your goals and your aspirations are higher. So yeah, I just wanted to say that when you said not a very Buddhist thing, because we're all going to do lots of not very Buddhist things, unfortunately, until we're not. Yes, please, Kodo.
Let me add that I have been trying to be a nicer driver for years. So today for 10 minutes, I'm like, yeah, like 10 minutes out of years.
Yes. Yeah.
So.
And it's funny. I've heard people say, because His Holiness will say, His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said, I'm just a Buddhist monk. And sometimes the lamas will be, they're incredibly humble and Lama Zopa, so incredibly humble. And to see him with any of his teachers is very, very inspiring. But sometimes, I hope it doesn't sound discouraging when you hear people who have been practicing for many years admitting to like, oh, I don't know what I would do if I had body lice. I guess that could be discouraging. For me, I've always felt like I'm so grateful that I have teachers that are so far beyond me that I can't even imagine. But I am also grateful for those other teachers and Dharma friends I have who are not perfect. I can relate to them, but I also see their goodness. And you know, especially when you have friendships and you watch over time, you can really see them changing. And that's inspiring too. So I hope it's not discouraging for me to say, yeah, I'm doing all kinds of stuff that aren't very Buddhist things. But hopefully I'm doing less and less of those and more of things that are Buddhist things. And yeah, I'm optimistic about my spiritual future in spite of myself. I'm giving one of those moments of silence in case anyone wants to chime in. Nope. Okay, so we have 4 minutes left. And what I'd like to do again is just a brief meditate. This time goes really fast. Like this hour goes really fast. And I feel like I'm talking a lot. So I hope that's okay. But let's take the last few minutes to reflect upon, you know, again, remembering, bringing to mind the motivation of why we joined the class to begin with. And thinking about just the virtue of, you know, there's so many other things we could have been doing tonight. Some neutral, some maybe not even good, positive things. So we all have this in common, that we decided to spend this time together to try to change our minds in a positive way for ourselves and others. And then that goodness and virtue, may that ripen in the highest way, enabling us to help all living beings. And then especially to those friends who are sick and who have recently passed. May they be reborn as human beings and find the teachings that will bring them to their highest enlightenment. And may all of our teachers have long and healthy lives to continue to practice and share their realization and knowledge with us. May we have good Dharma friends, good health and energy to continue to practice ourselves. And may the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but keep increasing. And thank you all for your time tonight. Really appreciate it. I appreciate this opportunity.